All right, good evening, everyone. It's January 29th, 2025, and this is a full committee meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. Tonight we have Afrida with us. She's our facilitator, and I'm going to pass it over to her at this time to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. So, can I go ahead and go ahead and go to the next slide, please? So we're going to start with our introductions. And so I go ahead and open the floor for PCCEP members to go ahead and come off of mute and introduce yourself to the space. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Schofield. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently the co-chair for the full PCCEP, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, also known as PCCEP. Kip?
Yeah, hi. Excuse me, just finished dinner. Kip Silverman, he, him pronouns. I am co-chair of the Settlement and Policies Subcommittee. And I will hand it over to Odelia.
Hey everyone, my name is Odelia Zuckerman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a youth member on PCCEP and the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. And I'll pass it to my other co-chair, Tia.
Unmuting. My name is Tia Palafox, and I'm a co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee for PCCEP and member. Thank you. And let's see, I am moving over. Oh, Carrie Driver, I see you there.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Carrie Driver. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of PCCEP and a member of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. I'll pass it to one of the newer members, Devonte.
Hello, everyone. Devonte Manyweather, member of PCCEP. Pleasure to be here. Thank everyone for coming. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Jorge.
Hey everyone, my name's Jorge. I am the other youth member, and I currently sit on both subcommittees, settlement and policy and engagement. I will pass it to Leslie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Martinez, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm also a member of both subcommittees technically, and good to be here tonight. I think.
See Noelle.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Noelle. I'm a new member to PCCEP. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
Is there any other PCCEP member that we might have missed?
Conrad and Eva.
Hi, this is Ronak. He, him pronouns, glad to be here.
And good evening, I'm Conrad Hewlin, he, him pronouns, and yeah, relatively new.
Viva Campo, committee member, and she, her pronouns.
Outstanding. It's nice to also meet the new PCCEP members. I haven't met you all yet. Hello, everyone. Next, we have city employees, PPB members, and other folks related to the city government to introduce themselves.
I can start. I'm Dory. I'm the PCCEP program manager. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. Go ahead, Meg. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Good evening, folks. Mary Claire Buckley, she, her, and from the Portland Police Bureau.
Stephanie Howard, Public Safety Service Area. Welcome and happy to see you all.
My name is Christopher Taft, he, him pronouns, and I'm from the Mayor Keith Wilson's office.
Hi, everybody. Chuck Lavelle, Portland Police Bureau, Assistant Chief, he, him pronouns.
And Sarah Ames from the City Attorney's Office, she, her pronouns.
Brody Sargent, Portland Police Bureau, he, him pronouns.
Just giving a little time for any other city officials to go ahead and introduce themselves. At this time, we also ask for our public members of the public to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. So Barb has already kicked us off, and thank you, Barb, for introducing yourself. Any other community members who'd like to introduce themselves, we'll open the chat for you. Next, we're going to move to community agreements. But I have, Carrie, you're right next to me. Do you mind reading off the community agreements? Can we get the slides back up?
No problem. Community agreements. Listen actively and respectfully. Share airtime. Be present and open to new information and perspectives. Assume positive intent. Respect each other. Respect the group. Speak your own truth. Communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully. Ask questions to clarify. Call out bias. And be okay with ambiguity.
Thank you, Carrie. If you need a reminder of those, just give us a wave and we'll make sure that you're able to be reminded of those. But these are the expectations of how we'll hold the space together. So an overview of today's meeting. First, we'll jump into updates. And we're going to meet our new mayor's liaison. After that, we'll review the Veil of Darkness recommendations and a response. Then we'll review the Normandale recommendation draft, and then we'll open ourselves up to public comments. So let's go ahead and move to updates. All right, is there someone, Dory, is that you?
Yeah, this is just a super quick one from me. We shared this last week as well, but this is just a quick update about, oh, I should have changed the title. It's really just the next month, just February at this point. But PCCEP's schedule is a little weird for February, so we want to keep, of course, our members, but also the public kind of up to speed on what's going on, since we appreciate all of you staying so tuned in with what we're up to. So as you know, we are working towards getting our elections done. Those will be held on February 26th. All of the spots that PCCEP elects will be re-electing on that date. Before then, we're having a private PCCEP retreat on February 8th. One of the things being discussed at that retreat will be the structure of PCCEP. There's been some discussion in prior months about possibly reformulating the way PCCEP is approaching its subcommittees. So that will be one of the things that they're discussing at their retreat, is that internal structure piece. And then we will have a follow-up special meeting devoted to that topic, PCCEP's internal structure, on February 12th. So those will be the only two public meetings we have in February, will be February 12th and February 26th, which will be elections. And that's it. That's my update.
Standing. So I'm looking at you here, Dory. I know that there might have been some time constraints. Are there still some time constraints we need to surface, or we're good?
We are good on the order that we described. Yeah.
Excellent. So next we have a new mayor's liaison. And so we'll go ahead and turn it over. Welcome to the space. Well, welcome back to the space, Christopher. Though you've been here before, but into a new role, it seems like.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frida. Yeah, and I see that you've given me 10 minutes. I'm going to probably yield back at least like 5 of that. I don't have much to. So my name is Christopher Taft. I've lived in Portland for 30 years. My background is actually in education. I worked for the Beaverton School District for a better part of a couple decades. Worked in a whole variety of different socioeconomic levels and schools. The last 4 or 5 years of my teaching career was in a partnership with Oregon State University and the Beaverton School District, mentoring graduate students. Transitioned into politics. I was Mayor Wilson's campaign manager for 13 months. Helped with the transition. Now an aide in his office with the responsibilities of public safety and collaborating with Portland Solutions to help facilitate Mayor Wilson's sheltering strategy. Stephanie Howard has been an amazing resource. She and I have her on speed dial. She's been catching me up to speed with all of the amazing work that PCEP's been doing over the years. I'm happy to be here. Keith Wilson is very supportive of the work that PCEP is doing, and looking forward to collaborating and working with you. And I'm going to yield back all my time unless people have questions. But that's my spiel.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Yes, we would love to open the floor to PCEP members for them to ask you any questions. Yeah, T, I see your physical hand.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Christopher. And I was wondering, what is the expectation for your attendance in our meetings?
It sounds like from my collaboration with Stephanie that I'm going to be coming to all the meetings, and I'm happy to come to the committee meetings if that's necessary. I'm happy to be here in any capacity that would be helpful for the group.
All right, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thanks for being here. And my question was, because I know Stephanie, this might be a question for Stephanie as well. I know in her capacity under Mayor Wheeler, it was like liaison to PPB and the mayor's office. And I was curious how that division of work will work here. Would we, talk to you, Christopher, if we wanted time with the mayor? And then Stephanie, would we just talk to you if we wanted time with PPB? Is that kind of how we can think about your two roles?
Yeah, I think I think truthfully, Chris and I are going to be working so closely that it either one of us, I think, can help facilitate the other. So I think our biggest goal is just to do whatever is the easiest for you. And then of course we've got folks like Mary Claire, who I think comes to just about every meeting, and others that I know will be happy to help facilitate any additional, any conversations or work that you want to do with PPB as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in kind of what Stephanie said. Like, we've been working very closely together. And obviously I want to have an open door policy. If you want to speak with the mayor's office, that, feel free to give me a phone call, give me an email. And I think at least the foreseeable future, for the next, 6 to 12 months, Stephanie and I are going to be kind of overlapping. And I think maybe the relationship in the division of labor might look a little different in a year or two. But for now, while I'm getting caught up to speed, we're going to be collaborating very closely with each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Kip.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to meet you. Stephanie was great to work with, so we look forward to working with you. I guess with what your last statement was perfect entry point for my question. I was wondering if you had at this point any questions for us while we have this moment to chat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any specific questions. I'm just excited to be here and learn from you. And I think Stephanie had mentioned that that going to the committee meetings was also something that I might partake in, just to help get caught up on all the details. And I look forward to doing that. So Kip, I don't have anything burning, but if I do, I'll make sure to, raise my hand at the appropriate time or to reach out at the appropriate time.
Okay, cool.
But thank you for the opportunity.
Odelia.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I have a few questions. I think was great how much Mayor Wheeler would set aside time for us, and I think we had quarterly meetings set up, and I think we'd be interested in that or more. And just like wanting to build our relationship with the new mayor. And I was just curious if you have any suggestions on how we could start doing that, because I think, again, like things are changing, things are different. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And also with council too, and how we can just be more involved and like have more collaboration with the mayor's office.
Yeah, I mean, I did actually have a specific conversation, and Keith is very much interested in coming to the events, I think, or to the meeting, sorry. And I think quarterly meetings does sound very reasonable right now. I don't know how many weeks days we're in. Keith, Mayor Wilson's drinking from a fire hose and getting caught up to speed. But I think that having quarterly meetings, if that was something that Mayor Wheeler did, that is something that Mayor Wilson would be completely open to. Your question about the council is a great one. I think everyone right now is navigating how to approach and how to talk to council, whether we're going through the council president, whether you're going to your district representatives. And I think that would be something that I would be love to hear insight from your group about how to, and as well as take that to council president and her chief of staff to get feedback from them on how they want to interact with you, because I know a lot of them, if not all of them, are very, very supportive of the work that you're doing. But I don't want to speak for any of them because I haven't had explicit conversations with them. But I would be interested in collaborating on how to keep those lines of communication open.
Thank you.
All right, PCEP members, any lingering questions for Christopher?
And I'll just say, sorry, I'm free to cut you off if you were about to talk. I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat, and then if you feel free to reach out.
All right, yeah, thank you for that, Christopher. We're also going to take a moment to just hold space and give appreciation to Stephanie. This is a transition, technically speaking. I know, Stephanie, you'll still be around and you'll still be actively involved in a lot of the work that PCEP is doing. And also it is a role shift, so we just want to take a moment to just share a genuine appreciation of how you been with PCEP, have you built relationship, have you stayed in contact and kept that conduit with the mayor open and easily accessible for PCEP members. So that's my appreciation. I'll open the floor to other PCEP members to also share appreciations.
Stephanie, it's been really great having you as a person who comes in with like great information and background and ideas and mentorship throughout the experience I've had. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, echo all the things, Stephanie. Really appreciate your collaboration and all the things you've done to get us in the rooms. And I know you're not going away, so but definitely want to take that, that moment in time and thank you.
Thank you all. Please don't feel like you need to do that. I really appreciate all of you, and I'm psyched to still be around. So I don't want y'all to feel like you have to say anything.
I appreciate how much you appreciate my cat being in the meetings also, but I very much do appreciate everything that you put into this, and I echo everyone else, so thank you.
Right. Go ahead, Devontae.
Yeah, I think, Stephanie, you've been great at providing us, a very grounded perspective whenever we are trying to make things happen. So I appreciate you for that. And so wish you the best in, your new role, and hope everything, works out as you wish. I did have, I guess, a question for Christopher, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Or I didn't know if it was if I missed that window or not. So I guess just for my own measure, I know that you're still getting caught up to speed, but I was curious as to what the expectation is, or the timeline for you to feel comfortable enough to where you're familiar with the work that we're doing, to where we can really start working more closely. I know that as are transitioning into your new role, that obviously you're getting caught up to speed, and I know that you mentioned that you're working pretty closely with Stephanie to accomplish that. Um, is there a particular time frame that you think that, for that leeway, or, I guess that's my question, is how long do you think it'll take you to feel comfortable and caught up to speed with what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish?
Thank you for the question, Devante. Yeah, that's a good one. I wish that I had a defined timeline for you. I think in my talking with Stephanie and her downloading lots of information, doing my own reading as well, I'm realizing that just coming to these monthly meetings is not going to take. It's not going to. I need to come to the committee meetings as well to really. I think that's going to help me get caught up to speed, to use your expression, like as quickly as possible. But it's tough for me to give you a definitive answer, because I wouldn't want to set expectations and then not deliver. But just know that my goal would be to get to be able to facilitate everything that your group wants as quickly as possible. I'm sorry that I don't have a defined point in time for you, but I'll work day and night to make sure that I do it as quickly as I can.
Thank you so much for the insight.
Right. So now we're just going to do a little bit of a shift of focus. We're going to jump right into move down in the agenda and focus on the Veil of Darkness recommendation and the response to that recommendation. So am I passing it to Carrie?
Yes, sure. So the information is up on the screen, but basically we wanted to take this space during our full committee meeting to talk with PPB, the public, and the PCEP members about the response we received on January 23rd to the recommendation we submitted in November 2024. What we felt was that the Veil of Darkness recommendation that we recommended to integrate the state's data into the PPB's STOPS data reports might have been misunderstood, or we'd like to clarify some of the questions we had about the recommendations with PPB, because it felt like their response was based on an over concern about the amount of work that was involved. And we totally recognize there's constraints on HR and PPB. And they also focused a lot on their response, both of which are available online on our website, about the fact that it's already done by the state. So why would it be duplicative? But because our mission is to take the information we're hearing, which for many, many years we've been hearing that Veil of Darkness would be welcome in the PPB STOPS data report, and bring it, distill it, and then bring it to PPBs in the goal of having more trust between the community and PPB, and more equitable policing. And we feel that integrating the STOPS data from the state into your the Veil of Darkness data into the report, and having some explanation of it, especially because PPB ranks well in terms of not having disparity of arrests or of stops after dark. We feel that it would be significantly beneficial to the trust, and we're just not sure why the response came back with we acknowledge that you offered to put the link to the state's data on the site, and we appreciate that. But the no, we would like to hear more about the no, and about we'd like for you to hear more about why we feel it's very important. PCEP members will definitely have more to say, but if maybe Assistant Chief Lavelle could speak to it initially to respond to some of the questions we had. And then just a technical issue, the response from PPB had a funny gap between page 1 and page 2. And if there's anything we're missing there that we should know, that would be helpful too.
Okay, so now we'll go ahead and open the floor for Assistant Chief Lavelle, or excuse me, Chuck Lavelle, and then after you're finished, Chief will then go to questions from the PCEP members.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize. I did invite my analysts, Lauren and Aubrey, but neither of them could make it tonight. And I do think, maybe to clear up some of this, it might be beneficial to actually have a meeting with the SSD team who does all of our analysis and statistics. And I'll tell you, I'd say manpower, just staffing is an issue. And additional work, I think people are very, very mindful of at PPB right now, taking on additional work. And I think if we have additional conversation, it would be beneficial to have CJC here as well. But I think from the PPB standpoint, we definitely believe in the transparency and the engagement with stakeholders. But I think this particular topic might require maybe another meeting to talk about some of the issues around doing it, especially for a long period of time, the time it would take and some of the resources that would be required.
All right. PCEP members?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I think that like I get the point that this already exists elsewhere, but I think we like the stop state in itself is a long document and it's hard to parse and understand when you're not like a statistician or an expert. And I think that's kind of like for me feels hard to understand why that couldn't just be included. I know you all agree to including a link to the Oregon data, but I also think there was in the letter a discussion about how no disparities were found in the past 6 years, which is really great. But I kind of felt like there was some logical inconsistency there just because there is currently no disparities doesn't mean there won't be in the future. And it felt like it was being used as like a proof not to include it ever, where we don't know. I mean, hopefully that data will stay the same and there won't be those disparities, but I think I'm curious why not include that a little bit more to be more transparent. And if things do change, like why not be aware or like have folks be aware of that?
Stephanie?
Just a clarifying question, because I think maybe I don't understand also. When we're talking about including it, does that really just mean like cutting and pasting from that to have it all in one place? Or what is that? Is it more detailed than that?
I think our recommendation was to basically cut and paste the data because it is quite user unfriendly to have to link to the state and then go to Appendix D to find the data. I mean, it's after that we as a committee are pretty experienced with this, and it's not easy. But the other part was we would like a little bit of dialogue, a paragraph, explaining, how it was compared to last year, how it was, any factors involved. That was our recommendation request.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that.
Okay, and I can take that back to the team too, just to make sure that that is understood. My thought was there was a request for some analysis of that data to then be included in our report.
Yeah, I mean, I think the work that we were asking for was kind of more the backlogging because we did ask for this analysis to be conducted since like the inception of stops data. And I think that's where the work would have been, but it's unclear why certain things wouldn't just like be included. And also on top of that with like the kind of like trouble with backlogging of the data. There was a reference to not having like date or times for arrests too. That was also confusing, and whether that was like digital or just didn't exist at all was something I was confused about. But I guess now I'm asking like 4 questions at once, so sorry for the overload there.
Now, when you say backlogging, just so I'm clear, do you mean past data, like previous data?
Yes. So we asked for the veil of darkness analysis to be conducted on all stops, like since it started. When was it? 2001, where stops data started?
About 20 years, probably.
Yeah, so that's what we asked for. So that would be like 14 years of PPB doing that analysis. But I assume you could use like the same, I mean, I don't know how it works, but the same regression model that the state uses and like inputting data, but again, don't know how it works, so.
I believe the state reports go back as well. I don't know how far.
Devontae?
Yeah, it's been quite a long time at this point since we had that the annual stops data report. But I believe that that was one of the questions that I did have for the analyst who was presenting the information. At one point during that meeting, I inquired if any of this data also includes or I guess included like the time of day that these stops were occurring, and if there was any shift in any of these numbers with that in consideration. And so, and he said no. And so I think that like Odelia did mention that just because that everything seems to be there's no disparities at this point in time doesn't mean that there wouldn't be at some point in the future. So it just seemed like it would be an additional indicator that we could use to make sure that everything is as it should be now, and in the future when the settlement is over and done with, right? And so I don't really see the and part of the pushback I believe that I had overheard is that there were different systems that PPB was using at different points in time, so that it would be difficult for all of that data to be gathered and compiled because it was all being housed in different systems over different periods of time. But if we were to even look at just now ongoing, right, I don't see why it would be that much more of an effort to include that in the annual report, not even like the quarterly report, but just like once a year. um, I don't feel like that's a completely unfair ask.
Mhm. So going forward, and then not the backlogging per se, but just in future reports to include it. Is that what you're asking for?
That, I mean, at a bare minimum, yes, that I would be satisfied with that.
Yeah, and that was part of the recommendation along with the backlogs. So we were asking for both, and the answer seemed to be like none of the above would happen. And I think we all feel a little confused on why. I don't know if you have insight into Chief Day's kind of further explanation.
Yeah, I think going forward would probably be easier than the going back the 20 years to do the backlogging, but we have changed our report management system and where our reports are housed. And I think, um, I'm not sure of the data limitations or requirements to retrieve that data. That could be why the times are not available, but not being on that system on a regular basis, I couldn't say for sure, but I could find that out.
Harry?
Hi, thank you, Assistant Chief Lavelle. I'm encouraged and excited that another meeting is possible to discuss some of the maybe confusions and possibilities. You mentioned CJC. I'd love for you to talk more so that everybody knows what that would be and or who they are and why you maybe want to get them involved.
Oh yeah, CJC is the Criminal Justice Commission. So they're the state of Oregon body that actually produces the Veil of Darkness report. So they're the ones that the link would lead to. And I think it might be beneficial to understand kind of how they do it, how they compile it, the analysis they do on it, as we, have this further discussions.
That's great. We have noted that the timing is an issue because their report is one reports a calendar year and one reports like mid-year to mid-year. So yeah, as an example. Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Chief Lavelle? Go ahead, Conrad.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Assistant Chief. I will call out, I'm newer and getting onboarded, but I understand the hesitation and reluctance, especially with a constrained workforce, about going back. I think I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but I know I personally would be very interested in if some of the analysts could at least come back with some of the limitations why they would be unable to do so, because I would take that as a good faith effort about what we need to advocate for and lobby for to ensure you all can get the resources to start at least going back a little bit. And right, I mean, 20 years of data is pretty significant and completely understandable, but just coming back with some bullet points, I think would go a long way.
Okay, no, I think that's reasonable. And I could take that back to them too.
Jorge?
Yeah, thank you, Assistant Chief. I think to add on to what Conrad is saying is I'm kind of sensing some confusion with the recommendation that was sent, just based on like the conversation that we're having. And so if you or Chief Day or the analyst have like additional questions for clarification, I think we'd appreciate that so we know like exactly what kind of got confused there.
Okay.
Leslie?
Yeah, thank you. And I kind of was going to say something similar because I did want to note that in the recommendation, we didn't expect the 20 years of data to be, done all at once. I think part of the recommendation was for us to work together to figure out how long it could take and also figure out almost like a work plan so that we could eventually get there, but definitely not all at once. So just wanted to make sure that was said.
Okay. So kind of an incremental look at it.
Okay, Dory, and then I see you, Odelia.
Yeah, just summarizing some of what I've been hearing. I think it's encouraging. It sounds like there's maybe a follow-up conversation to be had here and some middle ground. One thing that and PCCEP is, they've been talking for years at this point since I've been on, that PCCEP is super interested in deepening and developing their working relationship with the Bureau. One thing that Mayor Wheeler extended to PCCEP and that I hope continues with Mayor Wilson as well, but also on the Bureau side, every time PCCEP submitted a recommendation, Mayor Wheeler committed to having sort of a meeting, a policy discussion prior to issuing the response to sort of work through the things that are sometimes inherently missed in written communication. Or just like express like, well, this is a challenge on our end. Okay, well, this would work for us too. And I think that would be really healthy if we could start doing that with the recommendations that we're working with on the Bureau side. So just wanted to throw that idea out there. It really helped when we were able to do that with Mayor Wheeler.
Okay. And looking at the document, it looks like I'll double check the cutoff between page 1 and 2. Looks like maybe that was just a formatting error, but I'll confirm that as well.
Stephanie just put it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, Chief, you'll see in your email I copied. You have asked the PIO team to update it because I think it was just a weird conversion thing. So I pulled the text from it and included it here in the chat so that that full sentence is available right now, but we'll get an updated copy over. Yeah.
Odelia?
Yeah, I guess I actually had a bit of a question about that sentence you just shared, Stephanie. I know that the PPB uses the benchmark to analyze stops data and racial disparities, and I know at the state level they use the veil of darkness analysis to do that same kind of reasoning. So I'm curious why the veil of darkness analysis wouldn't provide an opportunity to enhance like an understanding of racial disparities and stops. I think that bit is a little bit confusing to me.
I can jump in. I think my guess is that they misunderstood and thought a duplicative analysis, but also I think the detail of the analysis that you get from Veil of Darkness and the benchmarking, I think, but I think this is exactly the kind of question that would be great in a conversation with the folks who are the experts on that. But that's my guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, go
I
ahead.
think it would be good. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get our analysts and the Criminal Justice Commission Veil of Darkness folks in the same space to talk about it, answer questions, and clarify, and see if maybe there isn't a way to actually do it collaboratively. Like when they're going to pull their data and we're going to pull our data, if there's not a way to kind of integrate them on the front end somehow, it'd be interesting to know kind of more about the processes.
Yep.
Yeah, hi there. My apologies. I'm switching and working off mobile right now. So I put my basic question in the chat, but I know previously, I think I've been on the committee long enough to be through 2 stops data reports. And one of the things we've discussed previously in the PCCEP meetings during those presentations, and that we've talked a bit about with this recommendation, is that there's value in understanding aggregate data, of course, and it's good to know that there's no huge disparities between what the PPB is reporting and what the state is reporting. One of the questions we've had previously, though, and it's a bigger question than just this recommendation, but it's related to it, is understanding the number of stops in aggregate based on perceived ethnicity or race still doesn't give us a great picture of the officers who are doing the stops, and whether there's a disparity or bias compared to other officers. Understanding that state law prohibits from naming anybody, but even knowing just from out of the roster if there's a disparity between different officers helps us understand if the anti-bias training and other trainings are being effective. And I think there's a correlation there also to the percentage of population in Portland versus the perceived ethnicities and people being pulled over. So that's a big statement, so I apologize, but I think it'd be really helpful to understand the breakdown between the types of stops, who's pulling people over, and if the correlation still meets that parity when looking at potential biases from different officers. If that makes sense, I hope.
Kip, are you asking to, I guess I'm confused by the question so a little bit. Are you asking to group ethnicities to specific officers without identifying them? So you're trying
Yes, essentially about about folks that are getting pulled over and whether there's when we look at the data in aggregate, it tells a one angle of the picture. What it doesn't help us understand is if the policies are being applied equally. And we understand that we can't identify individual officers. It's not what we're actually here for. But what has come up in these meetings and questions previously, it's been pointed out that there is a disparity population-wise. And for us to provide feedback and recommendations, understanding whether there's a equity across all the different officers who are engaging with people being pulled over is about equal, or if there are disparities within those stops. Hopefully that helps answer the question. The other thing with comparing aggregate to aggregate data, especially when we're talking about veil of darkness, is that there still might be a bias inherent that would come out in the data if we knew based on officer A, B, or C that doesn't line up with the local data.
Yep. In order, because some of what I'm hearing you say is related to the veil of darkness, but then also there's another topic of conversation that I'm also hearing with that.
Right, which is generally part of the stops reporting.
Yeah, right. Is it related to a different recommendation?
No, it's related to conversations that have come up in the stops reports meetings that we've had on questions from the community about understanding that in aggregate doesn't show a full picture. So there is a relationship here between the veil of darkness, the stops data, and the conversations we've had on getting a better picture of making sure that bias training is being effective.
Okay.
Or anti-bias training. We don't want bias training.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so I would open it to Chief Lavelle if you have a response, or to Stephanie if you have a response to that. But we do want to work to kind of narrow the topic to the veil of darkness for this conversation, but understanding that it is a small piece of a much larger conversation around verifying that the anti-bias training that officers are receiving are having the effect that it's intended. But I turn it to you, Chief Lavelle and Stephanie, if either you have any responses to that general conversation.
Yeah, and if I understand it correctly, I think, for us, we want to know all those things. For us as an agency, we want to hone in on if there's any bias so we can eradicate it and do all these things. And, we have stops data as a tool, and it's, really a statistical tool. And then the goal is to try to use that tool to the best end to try to tell a story or to figure something out that we can, fix, change, enhance. But it doesn't always give you that clear picture too. It gives you some indicators, maybe some places to look, but it's very difficult to use that data to say, aha, this is this here or there. So I understand, I think, what where he's going with it as far as the conversation around stops, but I also want to just put that out there that it's sometimes it's very difficult to convert the data into that picture or story that gives you the this is bias, this is this or that.
Chief. So yeah, we are in the last few minutes of this sections of our conversation. Is there any final comments or questions folks have for Chief Lavelle in addressing the Veladocus recommendation?
Yeah, I guess oh, Leslie, go ahead.
I think you might be asking what I'm about to ask, which is just kind of like, now that we have kind of some next steps, getting some like potential timelines or some, yeah, like what we can expect there.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I think it's just really getting a time where we could get the right people in the space and talk this through. Whether it's full committee, whether it's a smaller group from the committee, we're open as long as we can have a little bit of time to schedule the right folks.
And is that something that I guess we'll kind of circle with Stephanie on?
Yeah, I think Stephanie or Dory could help in that regard.
Thank you.
All right, outstanding. So let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So, yeah, so now we're going to just focus on our conversation on the recommendation, the Normandale recommendation draft. And I'll turn this over to PCCEP member.
I think this is Odelia. And yeah.
Yeah, do you want to go, Odelia?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we just wanted to give a little timeline and share some background on this process. We just saw or got news and saw a video of like a response to this recommendation. So we just kind of were like scrambling a bit before the meeting and wanted to keep everyone up to date and aware of what's going on. So just to provide some background, on October 30th, we first discussed the Normandale incident at a full committee meeting based on numerous public requests. Then on the 27th of November, a few of us, including myself and Ashley, met with Chief Day to discuss plans for the Normandale recommendation. And Chief Day expressed his support and encouraged PCCEP to align our work with the anniversary of the event, which is coming up in February. So next month. Then on the 9th of January, Ashley gave an update to Chief Day via email about the progress on the recommendation and keeping him up to speed. And then we had our first drafting session for the recommendation last week at our last PCCEP meeting last Wednesday, where PCCEP announced the plan to vote today. And then so earlier today, this afternoon, PCCEP issued a video apology, or not PCCEP, PPB, Chief Day specifically issued a video apology released at 4:21 p.m., which was prior to PCCEP's final review of the recommendation. And Tia, to answer your question, that was on the 30th of October when we had our first meeting about it. So I think we were hoping to just watch it all together, the statement released, to keep folks informed and then chat about it as PCCEP, because this is all very new, so we need some time to talk about it together.
So yeah, this is like just a couple minutes. We're gonna watch it.
We don't have any sound.
Yeah, let me know if you guys hear anything.
No.
Liz, let's just share screen and see if that works. I don't know if it's the embedded part of it. I'll send you the link.
Oh, I have it pulled up as a backup anyway.
Okay.
Is we still not getting any audio?
I'm wondering if it's the like screen share portion of things. I know sometimes you have to like opt into sharing sound.
That was totally it. My bad, guys. I'll start it over.
Cool.
Yeah, we're still not getting any audio. I think you have to back all the way out and reshare it. Got it. Thank you.
February 19th will mark 3 years since a mass shooting at an organized demonstration at Normandale Park that forever changed Portland's history. In an unprovoked gun attack on a group of protest march volunteers, June Knightley was murdered and several others wounded, one critically. In all likelihood, more people would have been hurt, if not killed, had it not been for the efforts of a participant in the demonstration who fired at the shooter and ended the threat. Among the injured that night was a young woman who went by the name Deg. Her injuries were so severe she required the support of a ventilator for the remainder of her life. Last summer, Deg chose to be taken off that machine and she passed away. Since then, I was able to sit down with Deg's mother, who shared with me her immense love for her daughter and the importance of transparency and empathy in the aftermath of this tragedy in our community. I have also met with community members to hear their concerns about the lasting impacts in the broader community. With the benefits of these insights, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the incredible pain and trauma this tragedy has caused, particularly to the survivors and families of those we lost. In addition, I want to recognize the role of the Portland Police Bureau played in exasperating that pain. Following the shooting, PPB issued a news release calling the perpetrator of this violent act a homeowner when in fact he was not. Additionally, the victims were mischaracterized as armed protesters when in fact they were unarmed traffic safety volunteers. While we later corrected our written statement to identify the perpetrator as an armed area resident, we did not clarify this was an unprovoked attack on an innocent group of people. We understand the harm this error caused, and for that we are deeply sorry. You may have heard me say before that PPB is a learning organization. It's my belief that we will learn and grow from this matter in a way that allows us to better serve the community, a community both Deg and June were such a big part of. My heart goes out to their families and loved ones and everyone impacted by this awful event. I hope for nothing more than peace and healing for all involved.
And there's one more slide, Liz.
Ashley, is this you or is this me? Sorry, I don't know.
I mean, I think we're winging it a little bit. So it's up to you if you want to go. Or
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. You keep going. You're doing great.
Okay. Okay, so obviously because this video was just released a couple of hours ago, we haven't had time to discuss this video and kind of how it affects like the recommendation or doesn't affect the recommendation we've been working on. I would say like I watched the video prior and I'm glad that there was acknowledgement of the harm caused, like, and I think we can all be glad that that happened. However, I think like it feels a little bit confusing as to like the timing of why this was released just like 2 hours before we were planning to potentially vote on this. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm coming to this space with like questions and confusion. And we really want to make sure like that trust that was like that's a lot of what was lost in this actual incident we are writing a recommendation on doesn't continue to go in that way. And this kind of feels like, for me as a PCEP member, I feel confused and as to why this process went this way. And yeah, that's my bit, but I don't know how other folks feel.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, and I just wanted to offer to Stephanie, did you want to speak to that specifically or
Yeah, and honestly, that the timing of that is 100% my fault. So I want to just take responsibility for that right now. What the way that this statement sort of came together was after very recently, and I think I gave this update at last week's meeting, but if I didn't, I'm so sorry. I had been meeting with survivor groups, and I met with them just last week also, and we were talking specifically about this statement, and there was urgency from my perspective to get that out as soon as we had their input on it. And so let me apologize. The timing of that was not intended to be unappreciative of PCEP's recommendation, so I'm so sorry for that. My thought was trying to facilitate getting this statement out as soon as possible in light of the collaboration with the survivor. So that I fully take the blame for that timing, and I'm so sorry. I didn't even think about how that would come across, and I'm really, I apologize for that.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I just wanted, I wanted to add and sort of related to that a little bit. I think there has been a lot going on in the background for this. When PCEP met with, when a couple members from PCEP met with Chief Day back in November, at the time, Chief Day was readily available to say, yep, we're going to do something like this. We're going to say a statement. We're going to acknowledge all that stuff. In that meeting, when we said, we all agreed, PCEP would still move forward with recommendations, sort of keep us all accountable or keep the process accountable. And that timeline, at that time, we were going to have a recommendation done by mid-December, I believe. And as this is a volunteer committee, timing and end of the year calendars, like we all just kind of decided we would give ourselves grace and move on in January. And that's why we sent an email to Chief Day to say, we're still here. We're still, we're still moving forward with recommendation. And then mind you, we always knew that these conversations happening with the families and the city's desire to make a memorial, like that, we all knew that was happening. I know Chief Day in that meeting in November had expressed that they wanted to do something, coming up to the anniversary. And I personally don't think there's anything suspicious about the timing. I think what you said, Stephanie, totally makes sense. Also, I just want to be mindful that like PCEP's event calendar changes a lot. So it wasn't like it was lined up, I think, in a certain way. I think it just happened. And, we were supposed to talk about the recommendation a couple weeks ago in December. So I'm not totally concerned about that. And I just wanted to kind of fill in everybody here today about kind of what those what that proposed timeline was and then what it ended up being. And I think, and I'll let other folks speak up as well, but I would like to understand if they're from PCEP members, what does this do to change our recommendation that we have? And maybe this is more of a question to the public. Was there anything missing in the video statement that we could, add to our recommendation? But also just be mindful that I think the statement today pretty much went over what we were asking for in the recommendation. But yeah, I'm hoping we can have a discussion about like, well, what is it that we want to submit moving forward? And also want to make the suggestion that maybe we could have Chief Day come to a future meeting. I don't know if it'll work out in February, because what Adelia said, our recommendation also was to include that pathway into that trust and healing and that further in that conversation. And I don't know if we necessarily need this recommendation to move us forward with that, but perhaps that's like a dialogue we could have with Chief Day in the space. Because we had also had offered PPB or Chief Day to come to PCEP and also make that announcement. Like, you know, there could be a variety of ways they could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, Ashley, I'm wondering if the question that you asked to the community, maybe we can hold that over for the public comment and bring this to resurface that question there. I see Tia, Devante, and then Odelia. I know you had your hand up, and then Jorge. Tia.
I'm not looking at the recommendation, the last recommendation right up right now, but was part of in the recommendation was a public apology from PPB. So do we feel like this was taking care of a piece of the recommendation? And also, I just wanted to add, I'm hoping that Chief Day knows that we're still waiting for the written that in addition to the apology, for the written response that we need to the recommendation.
Yeah, is there any PCEP members who can speak to that or?
Well, I guess we technically wouldn't be getting a written response yet because we haven't issued the recommendation. So that's if we decide to do that or not, but that hasn't even come yet because we haven't gone through the formal process, if that helps to answer your question.
Yeah. Yes.
And Tia, can I have a quick clarifying question for you? So you weren't asking when the corrections for the website will be made? You were just asking about PCEPs getting a response.
Yes. Well, with him, I feel like that was a public apology. And in our draft of the recommendation, in it does ask for a public apology, mainly to the Corkers. And another thing I noticed was that he wasn't using the word Corkers, and I don't think a lot of people know that word. And I saw him use traffic safety team. So those are just some of the things I was thinking and wondering, but yes, also what you said.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so just to be really clear, that apology and exactly what the chief read was word for word developed with the survivor group. So that is the language that they asked for in terms of the traffic support volunteers and things. So
okay,
the chief, I think, accepted every change that they asked for in the statement, and so the language that was chosen was with their input and with their crafting of a lot of it, I would say.
Okay,
folks know.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Tia, what I also heard you asking is whether or not that apology meets what it's making asking the recommendation. Yeah. So, and I think that that's something that y'all are going to discuss further, is what it's
okay. Yes, thank you.
Devante.
That's a great insight to have, to know that the survivors were very heavily involved in the apology that was read by Chief Day. Dory just posted in the chat, and actually number 3 in that list is what I was going to speak to, as far as I was going to inquire why there wasn't any part of the apology that mentioned why the system failed in the first place, and why the statement was so wrong, and why it took so long, and ownership of the fact that it took them a very long time to issue the correct statement. And once again, I don't want to overstep, because if the survivors wanted it to be read that way, and wanted that to be the content of it, I respect that entirely. But I guess from the outside looking in at the agency, that would have been a very powerful act of sincerity on the agency's part, to take ownership of why that system failed, and why it took so long for that to be rectified, instead of just the simple, "Hey, we're sorry."
Can I interject with sort of a meta comment? I'm gonna suggest PCEP, because again, we're scrambling here. This came out 90 minutes before this meeting. And this agenda has been posted, of course. So I'm gonna suggest that you think about your comments in the context of, are you gonna still plan, are there merits to you still discussing this recommendation? From the PCEP perspective, is the PCEP perspective different than what was presented in what has been publicly issued 90 minutes prior to the start of this meeting? So thinking about it in that way, rather than deliberating over why wasn't this in that one,
Well,
deliberating over should you discuss
I think
adding
I think
Yeah.
that's the challenge, is because if the survivors in fact wanted it to be read the way that it was read, then these things that we have here in this list would be asking to go beyond what the survivors are asking for. And so that's a conundrum that I am faced with at this time.
Yeah, I think I totally hear what you're saying. And I think that, again, like, we have never said we're speaking for or behalf of the survivors of this. And I think we're coming at it from our own unique PCEP lens of being that agent for accountability to the PPB. And like, that is not to say the survivors shouldn't feel this way or shouldn't ask for this, but I think we're also allowed to ask for things, given we've been writing this recommendation the whole time. And so I do feel like, just to respond to your comments, Stephanie, I feel like you were in the meeting with Chief Day as well and knew we were writing this process. And I think that, I don't know, it's hard for me to hear that, like, you totally just messed up. I think that, like, the timing for me feels really intentional, and like it's trying to like get at or undermine the work we're doing here for accountability, and to ask those like questions Devonte was bringing up of like, why did this happen? Why has it happened till now? Why was it because it was a Black Lives Matter protest? Like, all of these things. So yeah, I feel like, I know, like, we all have different perspectives as PCEP members, but I just kind of still feel like unclear on the timing. And even because you all knew we were gonna vote on this today, like, why not wait till tomorrow or next week? It just feels like very intentional in that way.
And I'm sorry for that. Let me also say though, this is this incident is very multifaceted, right? There are the direct impacts with the people who were there, the impacts of their loved ones who were also impacted, and then there's the broader community impact. And as I said last week, it is an absolutely valid community perspective that I think PCEP is intended to bring to all these conversations. So I just want to be clear. I don't envision like this one piece of the conversation as resolving the entire conversation or any questions that community has. And I also know that this is not the only recommendation related to this incident that PCEP has been talking about, bringing forward. So I'm so sorry. Again, that is 100% on me, and I hear you, and I appreciate your candor and sharing how that feels for you, and I am very sorry for that. But I think there are still aspects of this that are validly within the community's purview to ask about, to understand, to request responses for. But I think this one specific aspect was something that I think the families and the survivors specifically needed in the way that they needed it, not to say that's the end of the conversation. So I guess that's another thing that I'm just thinking of in terms of how this recommendation, what happens with this, and what happens with future recommendations that you've all been considering as well.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, looking at what's been put in the chat, that Deg's family said, like, they've been seeking a full apology for years, and this issue gained more traction like due to the PCEP meeting. Again, I still feel like the chief was aware of this as well and our work and seemed very like wanting to work together. And I guess it just feels kind of like words were said, but that wasn't maybe like the actions. And so I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking because I'm taking up too much space now, but I still think we should move forward with the recommendation. I still think it stands, and also just for independence sake that like we did put in this work and it should be recognized, and there's more that we're asking for beyond what was in Chief Day's statement. So that's my POV on this.
If I could add on,
Go
I
ahead.
definitely see everyone's view, and in some way I see Dory's on like this came out like not that long ago, like not within 24 hours. And yes, we have somewhat of a recommendation that definitely needs to like some things needs to get moved around a bit. I'm just not quite sure. So like a little bit to oppose on what Odelia said about moving it forward, because there's some things that the chief did mention, some things that are missing. And so I feel like we should kind of go back to our subcommittee and look into this more to see like what was missed, what wasn't missed, because there's definitely I feel like there's still additional work that needs to be done when it comes to this whole matter.
Thank you, Jorge. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you. So yeah, I agree that I agree that we should move forward with the recommendation because of the 6 points we had. I feel like 2.5 have been, or 2 have been addressed, 1 hasn't, and then we're really looking for the accountability of like why was the decision made to produce the first statement and what has changed. So I think we should move forward with the statement. I do recognize that the apology, you know, in terms of historically with my experience with PPB and looking at other police bureaus, it's a really thorough and meaningful apology. It really does address a lot of our concerns about the public acknowledgement of the misinformation and the harm that it did. I'd like to see a transcript of it published because the video is not immediately accessible for everyone. And other than that, I think we can move forward with our recommendation about some of the procedural issues related to how it was handled initially.
Thank you, Carrie. Ashley?
Yeah, so I had raised my hand initially to say I think that we should pause on the recommendation. And I'm kind of going back and forth with that, thinking, I think, yeah, hearing all of you speak since I raised my hand, that we should move something forward because I think like this topic had come to, I think, PCCEP Space like earlier last year. So it had been something, we'd even talked about it in another meeting about bringing it onto the agenda. So it had just been in our ethos for a while. And I think around this conversation, you know, we had heard the community, we wanted to sort of leave space for them, but also that this could be a conversation segue into that like trust and healing and transformation, you know, discussion that we want to have with PPB. And so I guess I was just struggling a little bit tonight of does this current recommendation still uphold that intent that we're trying to move forward with, and then how can and if we want to talk about truth and healing with the community, like do we do it in a different way? Although I want to say what I've going back and forth with is that hearing you all speak about the procedural stuff and how we can get a little more details into that, that would be probably really good. And then I wanted to stop and just, acknowledge that, yes, Assistant Chief Lavelle is here. And I think there's this question of why was this error made and what has been learned from that. And as, Chief Lavelle, you were the chief at the time during this shooting like that. Could you shed some light on that? Because then maybe that could help us think about what we want to put in the recommendation for that focus on like that procedural stuff, that because apology and acknowledgement is all great, and I think that is exactly what the community want, but I think deep down we want to know, what did you guys really learn from this? And we know that there's the PIO is now a non-officer, so we see like we know like some changes have been made, but curious just what kind of inside knowledge you could share with us tonight since we're here.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. From my perspective, one, I'm appreciative of the chief for doing that. I know he, the mayor, Stephanie, met with family members, community members. A lot of behind the scenes work has gone into crafting the messaging too. And I think from my point of view, 2020, there's things we would have done differently there. At the time of this incident, there was also an officer involved shooting where I was present at that officer involved shooting. Our PIO at the time was a backup filling in because the other PIO was at the officer involved shooting, and having someone get there and actually get out critical information sooner would have been better on our part. So we would have had a better understanding of what the actual incident was. I think, with the benefit of hindsight, there's things we would have done differently at the scene or in responding to the scene, and in the wording. We would have been more mindful about the impact or how those words, homeowner, may have been perceived by people versus area resident or another descriptor. So I think, for us, like the chief always says, we're a learning organization. We do a lot of things in the moment, and then we get the opportunity to look back and say, oh, you know what, that wasn't so great, or that could have been better, or we need to improve here or there. And I think we try to do that. I think this is a great example to me in many ways of how PCEP, your role, bringing the community concerns forward, working with police, figuring out ways to not only just do accountability, but to, reduce harm, and in this case, hopefully bring some healing. To me, this is a great example of that working. In the video, I don't know much about the timing piece or whatever, but I feel like it's a good piece of information to have as you confer and make decisions about your recommendation. Maybe there's benefit in seeing it right now to know, if maybe there's something you want to change, want to see differently, or happy with, or whatever that may be. But I think just from my personal point of view, from the agency's point of view, we're not seeking to do harm or hurt anyone or anything like that. In the instances where we have done that, we try to learn from it, apologize, let people know, hey, we're sorry, we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to learn. So I think the work that the chief has done with the family, the mayor, he's had conversations with me, our former PIO at the time, and we all agree like this is the right thing to do, the right path to take. Have compassion for families who lost loved ones, and realize we play a role in putting out information to the community, critical information, and in times where we misstep or can do things better, we're happy to apologize and try to make amends.
Yeah, appreciate that acknowledgement, Chief. I just want to note that this is the time that's like also designated for you all to begin that redrafting as well. So I think really great questions are being asked, and digging into maybe some background information would be helpful. It's also an opportunity to kind of, with the information that we know now, begin to digest that response and begin to really craft a different recommendation if that's what you all are choosing to do. Kip, I see your hand. Go ahead and go to you, Kip. Noel, I saw your hand go down, so I'm gonna jump back over to you after Kip just to see. But yeah, go ahead, Kip.
Yeah, thank you. And listening along, a lot of the conversation I've heard, some of the points I wanted to bring up, I do think that the apology aspect of the recommendation that we've been workshopping was, as previously stated, a small part of the overall recommendation. So I support going forward and continue discussing it. One of the biggest things that I've heard multiple times over about the year and a half that I've been on the committee, and when the video was released earlier, I had turned out to be two different people plus PCEP reach out to me to alert me to it. Is that the apology is really important, setting the record straight is very important, but as previously mentioned, there's still a need to understand why, um, how the decisions were made to release the information when it was released, understanding what steps have been put in place to make sure it does not happen in the future, and also to address things that were brought up even last week's meeting, about a perceived bias at the very least of treating different groups of protesters in different ways based on the statements being made. So there's still a lot more to be unpacked with this. So I do think we should, if we need to discuss it tonight and workshop it more beyond tonight rather than voting on a recommendation, that I'm chill with that, but I think we should move forward and keep discussing tonight.
Yeah, appreciate that. Noel, I'm gonna touch base with you real quick, and then I see you, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm just reading the last message that was put into the chat.
Summarizing my
Well,
message.
yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I do think, as far as this recommendation happening, right now would be a good time to kind of pause. Of course, if everyone wants to keep having conversation on it, that's totally fine. My thoughts about it though in the video, um, I I think it's very important. Of course, we're going to have bigger conversations. We're coming from the point of view of the community and the community's concerns, but this was directly uh, involving the victims, and I think that's who needs to be centered in all of this. That's not all who's included in it, but I think the victim's voice, their families were centered and they were heard, and that's what's important in this. Thank you.
Appreciate that perspective, Noel. Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to, if we want to discuss it tonight too, that, I think that there's time for that, sounds like, but I also wanted to provide the perspective that there's no reason why we can't acknowledge in the recommendation, this video that was released and just say, great start. There's more work to do. We feel like you accomplished, you were able to address this, this, and this, but we, still, what we've already talked up until this point, that we, the procedural stuff that still needs to be addressed. So I just wanted to provide that perspective.
Yeah. Go ahead, Odelia.
Could we pull up the document and start looking at it so we can see what's kind of repetitive or not repetitive or adding stuff? Is there anything besides like the apology ask that people feel should no longer be mentioned? Or is it still seems like everyone I think is interested in parts of it. So
yeah, can we take a quick straw poll? Are folks interested in like getting back into the document and considering moving forward with it, because I'm not sure if we're like exactly 50-50. It almost sounds like that. So I'm not sure what to do.
Is there like a kind of temperature
Yeah,
check?
it's just like a very informal raise your hand just so I know what to do. If you want to take a look at it right now and consider moving forward with it in this meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that's enough. Yeah. Okay. All right, I will pull it up. Alrighty. So here we are. We have about an hour. Let me know what you want to get into here.
Carrie.
Sorry, my hand was raised to vote, but
okay.
Now that you've given me the microphone, if we skip right to 1 through 6, maybe that would be kind of the meat to address.
Yeah.
Because I feel like from there we can add the context. So they did, in my opinion, they did address number 1. Numbers 2, 3, and 4, they did not address. Number 5, they did address. Number 6, it was partial because they gave a public apology and a correction, but not the information about how it happened and how it won't happen in the future.
Devontae?
I'm going to say that I agreed with what Viva mentioned and proceeding with 1 through 4, but I think that Carrie is correct that they did mention briefly what was wrong with the initial statement. So really it would be 2 through 5 or 2 through 4 in that scenario. But I also don't think that we should erase what the recommendation was originally asking for. If there's a way for us to acknowledge at this point in time that they have complied with 1, 5, and 6, and that's all that's left that we are asking for at this point that has not been completed is 2 through 4. If there's a way for us to kind of indicate that at this point in time in the document, just for record's sake. I don't know how people feel about that. And if not, then I would be fine with eradicating 1, 5, and 6 and just leaving 2, 3, and 4. But I think that because, this is what we were originally asking for and that they did complete 1, 5, and 6 2 hours prior to us being, having this meeting, if those things shouldn't still be present in the document that we had asked for them or that we were going to ask for them.
Go ahead, Viva. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized, thank you. I like the idea of kind of both of what you're saying, Devontae. I like the idea of removing them from the action item list, but like putting them in still like lower or above or something and acknowledging those pieces. So like including them still that these were things that we were going to ask for, and also like acknowledging and thanking them for being proactive that we didn't have to. Like that is nice, that is great. But still kind of including them for that reason, I think would be my thought.
Leslie?
Yeah, I think we can almost keep them here. If I'd like to scroll up and see how we intro this section, because I'm almost wondering if we could say something, this time it like including or like we feel like these 6 things are important in order to move forward type of thing, and then list out the 6 things, and then maybe after we list out the 6 things we say something like, we acknowledge that the recent video released by the PPB addresses the following, 1 and 2 or whatever. But that way we keep them all together. But with a lead in that says, like, we think these six things are important. You've already addressed some of them.
Go ahead, Tia. Tia, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm doing the best I can in tracking with all of you and the visual, but I don't have up the Portland Police Bureau's webpage, and that's why I'm thinking we want to see the written changes, not just going off the video we saw today. So I'm just trying to follow along and assure myself that we're talking about making changes to what we see on the PPB webpage.
Tia, are you referencing the edited statement that they have already put out about the incident?
Yes.
Well, okay. Devontae?
Yeah, I mean, and once again, I would be interested in hearing what the other members think about this, but I think it's worthwhile to put the date and time that 1, 5, and 6 were checked off, right? We were supposed to be formally submitting this or voting on this today, and it was checked off 2 hours, 3 hours prior. So I don't think that I think that that information should be included in this. If we are going to acknowledge that they've taken the steps, I think the context of, well, when did they take those steps is important.
I agree with Devontae on that.
Me too.
Yes.
How would you like that to be like stated in the document? Because I'm like,
maybe something like we acknowledge instead of like recently that the actual time and date, which something like that.
Well, I think what it is, like, I feel like I'm not sure what to put, because this is stated as a list of demands, but also you want to acknowledge that some of them have been done on a certain date, but they're still in the sort of future tense sort of list of demands. So I'm kind of like, what is the list?
Yeah, so I think like the intro to that, I would suggest being something like, in order to properly address, the concerns, we feel like these 6 items are important, like in the lead-in, so that instead of them being like, these are the things we're requesting, like these are the things it kind of still says the same thing, but in a way that says like, this is our list of things that we think addresses the situation.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think.
Yeah, I think just saying like for us, this is like what makes this list comprehensive. So we think it's like essential to name these things like comprehensively, and we understand that some of them have been whatever.
And then in that second after the list where it says recently, we'd say like we acknowledge that on January 29th at such and such time, chief, and you can put in comma or whatever, a couple hours before PCCEP met for the deliberation, this was met, if we feel like it's important to call that up.
That's exactly how I would have. I agree with that.
What do other members think about that? Who haven't chimed in yet?
Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, so just kind of keeping that list all together and saying, like, it's on the bottom there, but like PCEP has identified these 6 remedies that we feel are important to repairing trust. We acknowledge that X, Y, and Z have been done through this press conference, but we find it important to include this list comprehensively to ensure our message, whatever, something like that. So just like keeping them all, but recognizing that some of them happened.
After, yeah, okay, after, yeah. Me personally, I'm good with it.
I was wondering if we should change the language where we call the traffic safety team corkers, just since we've gotten the knowledge that so actually sorry, let me go back. Answer your question, Odelia. Yes, I think I agree with all the changes and like keeping all the points. I think that would make sense. And then yeah, I just wanted to reflect that like we learned the family calls corkers, you know, had identified corkers in a different way, and if we wanted to change that language in our recommendation.
Yeah, or we can say like both of those, the different language, just to include both too. So, because some people call it that.
I was wondering if we could achieve the same accomplishment by just saying, while we were in the process of writing this recommendation through public meetings, these requests had been accomplished. Not because I just feel like we can list all our requests, but then listing that some of them have been accomplished, maybe it's more powerful to say in the process of our writing this recommendation through public meetings.
Just another note, I think it would be better if we just left it as a traffic safety team instead of specifically naming corkers. First off, just to respect the survivors' families who actually helped write the, I guess, apology that was stated. And then secondly, I don't want the specific corker group to be identified as someone by like someone who's opposing anything that's going on and then have something like harmful happen to them. So I think just using traffic safety team is a better use of language. And then if people want to discover more, they can find out that it actually was the Corker group, but that's just how I feel.
I think another suggestion that I might have is kind of adding both terms could be another possibility. Adding like the traffic safety team / corkers, because some folks are familiar with both, so it's not like confusing because some people might see it like as corkers, some might see it as a traffic safety team. I would recommend adding just both terms into it.
That
I
comment,
wanted, yeah, I wanted to chime in as well. If you want to read the comment ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there would need to be some resolution there because Jorge's comment would be at odds with what Ronak just suggested.
I'm in favor of just leaving it as corkers, because they refer to themselves in the documentary that we watched. That's how they referred to themselves, was it not?
Yeah.
The people who
And
participated in it did.
right, and some of them still refer to themselves as corkers. So I guess I'm confused on why we were. Granted, right, we have the personal apology from, you know, the family members of the victims, but then some of those very same corkers are still engaged in what they would describe as corking. So I don't know if anyone else feels like we're getting too hung up on changing the language there.
I might just jump in since that was part of the discussion. I don't think for purposes of this, I don't think you need to worry about corkers versus the other terminology. I don't think it would be. I think for your purposes, it would be just fine to go with the language you have.
Yeah, Kat's suggestion also is useful for just including both.
Noel?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to include, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Noel.
as far as like with this recommendation as a response, are we looking for a written statement or something to be published as a response to this recommendation? Like as far as like the accountability piece of like, this is what's happened, this is why it happened, this is why it's not going to happen moving forward. Like, do we want another press release, so to speak, like them to speak publicly to it, whether in a video or written, or do we want that to be a conversation where they come to the meeting? Or I guess I'm a little confused on that. And then also, since Stephanie has spoken to the victims and their family, I wanted to make sure too, we're not, this goes back to the Corkers traffic safety thing, that we're not missing anything or putting anything in there that could be upsetting, I guess, as far as language is what I wanted to bring up.
Quick response to you, Noel. I had the same exact question about what the product is as a request, because if you all are sort of like having this list, but then saying, well, some of them have been done, I find it slightly confusing if you're sort of saying we don't need number one anymore, then what is the product if that context isn't supplied? So I think that's something you need to resolve.
That relates to why I raised my hand, because I think I remember that we decided specifically not to prescribe a specific method, unless I'm thinking of a different recommendation and a different issue.
No, that did happen,
Okay.
but I think that's because it was like we asked it at first said like there should be a press conference on the anniversary or something, and that felt a little too prescriptive.
That's what I recall as well.
So do we still feel like we can leave it up to them how they address the corrections, or do we want to or request a specific action? I always like things in writing for record keeping, because it's helpful to have the train of information.
So I'm hearing Carrie say something in writing, Odelia says something in writing, Devante says a formal statement. Does that feel right?
I would want to wait to hear from the public as well.
I agree. Wait for the public.
Okay.
Are we saying wait for the public for, what are we waiting for the public for?
We will hear public comment on this. We could decide to do that now, because deciding what the product is, I think kind of the edits moving forward kind of hinge on that. Yeah, I think that's what people are referring to.
Oh, okay. And then we're still voting on this tonight, yes?
It is
Depends
possible.
on Dor, I'd like to open public comment if that's possible, seeing that we are kind of getting close to the time in some way.
We can do that. PCCEP, is there a consensus to move to public comment?
So, community members, if you have questions or comments or thoughts about this recommendation, and we'll limit those questions to the recommendation at this time, please raise your virtual hand or come on camera so that I can see your physical hand. Go ahead, Barb.
So I put a couple of things in the chat, and the chat keeps moving, so I can't necessarily find them to read them very well, which is a little frustrating. But one thing I wanted to bring up which is just a little tangential to this, but you might want to actually put it in the recommendation, which is, are you going to meet with the chief to clarify anything in the recommendation, which I couldn't spell right? You know, so his response isn't based on misunderstanding like this last time around a little bit with the veil of darkness. That's my main comment. Otherwise, I think y'all are doing a good job figuring this out.
Just to respond to that, I think that we certainly can ask for that. There's no like definite answer yet, but I think that's something we can try to do before every recommendation with the police moving forward like we do with the mayor. So hopefully, but can't give a yes quite yet.
Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Bushinsky, Portland Cop Watch, she, her. I was at, not the whole video, that presentation you did in person last fall, where you showed the video of the Corkers, what happened to them. And it seems that from the beginning, the police thought it was armed protesters and that was they treated people rather badly. They didn't allow the friends of the victims to come in and hold their hand or take care of them and, you know, make sure they got medical aid and all that. And I think that's problematic. Also, yeah, calling somebody a homeowner does give them more credibility, but the main thing is whether or not they were a homeowner, they were clearly an Aryan supremacist from the things they said, and that was why they were doing this. And I think that needs to be framed also. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Barbara.
You guys do a real good job.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to add to what Barbara just said, that the police also seemed reluctant to note that the protest was a Black Lives Matter protest about police violence. I think so. I mean, really, I think one of the points that somebody made earlier is that I don't have the numbers in front of me because I can't see it really well on my screen, but that part number 6 was only partly done. I don't think you should acknowledge that these things were done completely. I think that the apology that was given was not. I mean, it was addressed to the family, but it was done in a video that was for the whole community. And I think there are pieces of it that are seriously lacking. And I think that the white supremacy angle that Barbara mentioned and the Black Lives Matter angle are stuff that you should remind the police about, because they need to be able to talk about those things. That's partly why you're doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Other community members.
Devontae, can I ask you to explain more on your comment?
Yeah, like what specifically? I just feel like now that they have issued a formal apology, right? Being that addresses parts of this, I would hate for it would be very unfortunate if too much time passed in between these that they then said, no, we've already issued an apology, that's it. Right. I don't know. I don't make those decisions. I'm not saying that that's exactly what would happen, but a lot of times when too much time is allowed to pass, that things don't line up the way that they would have if everything would have happened in the proper chronological order. So I would hate to delay this for too long. If possible, I would like to get this. I would like for us to be able to vote on this tonight, instead of putting it off.
Barb?
Go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that I hear what you're saying, Devontae, and yeah, hopefully we can just move forward with this sooner than later. But I think the power that I guess PCCEP has here is that when we submit this, the chief does have to get back to us in 60 days. So I think in terms of like the energy to, fix the actual statement in written form and get back to us about the procedures, I think that will still happen because there'll be that arm that we have as an advisory board to get that 60-day response. So I just wanted to clarify that in case.
Yeah, and I do, but I mean, we also just very recently got a refusal, right? So it's just like, that response in 60 days may not be what we think it should be. We don't know, right? Until we get it. But I just would like to. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Barb, go ahead.
Okay. It makes sense to have all 6 of those there for continuity, and because that's where you guys started. It also makes sense to me to acknowledge that that part of that there was a message to the family, that the chief put out. I agree with Dan and Barbara, but what I'm thinking about is, I realize this is a recommendation, not a negotiation, but when you're negotiating, you usually have things in there that you're willing to give away. So, what you guys seem to be, and what the community seems to be really interested now at this point, is to hear what changes have been done. Like, has the PIO office been expanded so that they're not going to have a situation where there's only one PIO when there's 2 major incidents? Or, give them those kinds of, I'm not saying offer that, I'm just saying those are the kinds of things I think you guys are interested in now. So as long as you don't leave the door open for them to just say, oh, we did everything you said, then I think you guys are in good shape, if that makes any sense. I hope it makes sense.
KM?
Oh, hey, thanks. Kat Mahoney, an attorney in Portland. So I think the video coming out today was good for the folks who needed to see that video. I don't know how many people saw that video. However, I think the other thing it did, and I find it hard to believe that nobody thought ahead, was that it would throw this meeting into the confusion ball that it is right now. And I wonder if that was part of the motive too, to almost make this recommendation moot, as in, hey, we already did this. We're the good guys. We don't need a recommendation from PCCEP. Thank you, and move on. Because they've done that before. They did it with my court case, where they put some directives into their PPP manual, and then parts of my lawsuit were moot. And it's great that those changes are there. It's great that certain things will not happen in the future for legal observers and for journalists. However, it also got a little bit of accountability taken away. I'm looking at your bullet points, and I don't think these were actually addressed in that apology. That apology was for the survivors, with the survivors. It doesn't address the procedures that went wrong, mistakes that were made, the fact that Chief Lavelle had to give that statement and then received a lot of heat afterwards, which wasn't fair. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the information that he was given. So the question, I mean, what you're looking for here is, why were those procedures the way they were? What has changed since then? What remedial steps have been made? And what are you doing to ensure that it never happens again? Because we know something like this will happen again. And we don't want to see this again. So like you're asking for transparency, you're asking for change, you're asking for an amending, not necessarily an apology. An apology is I step on your foot, 2 weeks later, I step on it again, I step on it again, I step on it again, every time I say I'm sorry. What you want is changed behavior. What you want is systemic change. That's what you're asking for in these bullet points. I do think the bullet points are gonna have to be all edited though, unfortunately, because what you kind of want is a recap of the incorrect initial statement, the follow-up statement made in April 2023, why was there even a necessity? But you also want to know, how did that initial statement get to Chief Lavelle? What happened? What was the PIO? Yes, there was a couple of things that weekend that happened that stretched the police department thin. So they say, okay, well, so they're asking now for these other things. They've gotten what? New Cessna planes. They've gotten some more cops. They got a robot dog. Okay, does a robot dog help us when there's another mass shooting to get a correct message out? Let's talk about where the money goes, what the statements are, what processes are in place, and what checks and balances do the police have? You know, because if they want us to call them, to trust them, to rely on them, then they also have to show up time and again and not make excuses. One of the things they said was that the witnesses there were not really complying and not helping, which also cast a bad shadow to make it sound like these protesters, these people, those people don't want to work with them. Well, part of it is because it's the police that kind of kick off a lot of the violence. It's the police that killed George Floyd. You know, so it's like, how are we building back that trust? What you're looking for here is, what are the processes and procedures that PPB has done to ensure that they don't do this again, they don't drop the ball, they don't help create a bias, they don't perpetuate a bias. That was not necessarily addressed in the video.
Thank you. Carrie.
Yeah, I wanted to ask PCEP members if we're planning to send this to the chief of police and the mayor. And does that, we're asking the chief of police very direct things, the CIO, very direct things, but are we also planning to send it to the mayor, and does that impact how we're revisiting this draft?
I think it's always been, my understanding is always to the chief of police. Yeah.
We sent the last one to the chief of police only, but normally we send them to, the Veil of Darkness was sent only to the chief of police. Normally we send to the mayor and the chief, or just the mayor. So I just want to acknowledge that, you know, having a awareness of our audience will impact like how we phrase this recommendation.
Could we send it to both, but just say we're including the mayor because we
Yeah,
want to?
I think we could just, like, the direct person is the chief, and we can just CC the mayor and his staff on the matter, because it's more of a PPV/chief matter.
I agree. I don't think any changes would be made specifically by the mayor, but so
Yeah.
okay, so just to bring it back, because we're at 8:07 now, and looking at what we want to say to the chief, we definitely want to ask for explanations for what happened. As Kat just said, you know, the recap of the incorrect information that was presented and how it got released reflects what we're trying to say in our statement. Can we, as a committee, work around what we're still requesting and whether or not we want to ask for a specific deliverable for it, or whether we want to leave it vague as to how they present the information? But I think those are our two questions, unless I'm misinterpreting what the committee needs to decide. One being, what are we asking for? And two being, how are we asking for it to be presented?
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about saying like we think this should at least be in writing in public, and they can really figure out the rest. I think like a lot of, and however like they can best make community aware of their statement. Yeah, but for me, I'm not stuck on anything with that. How are other folks feeling? Are you feeling like solid here or still confused? I think like, is there, yeah, agreement on this content or are folks unsure?
I'll go ahead and speak. I'm feeling a little unsure because my thoughts are wanting to be as productive as possible with recommendation as far as getting acknowledgement, but also moving forward to making sure this doesn't happen again. I'm not fully set in any direction or another. I'm listening, I'm here, I'm thinking it over, and overall just hearing. I'm really thinking on what's all being said, and I appreciate everybody's feedback.
Thank you, Noel. Devontae?
This is still public comment or community comment section, right?
No, we're not in the public comment section. We were just opening the floor to hear comments from the public about this particular piece.
Okay. So I think I'm fine to move on if other people are, but I am curious to know. Kate mentioned that she thought that there would have to be changes to the bulleted points that are mentioned there. And I was curious to know what she thought that those changes should have been, because I feel like we are asking to know systemically and as far as the process, why things went wrong and went the way that they did. We asked that in a couple of the numbers here. So what did you think that needed to be added or taken away from these bullets?
Oh, it's not necessarily taking anything away or adding it. It's just restating it. It's like bullet one, what PPP stated incorrectly in the initial statement. You might want to add there what they said in the initial statement on February 19th and how was that information disseminated. And then number two, when the corrections were made, where did those corrections come from? Three, what internal assessments have been done? How was that done? What's the chain? Like, did it come from BOEC? What if it's BOEC who screwed this whole thing up? You don't know. Let's find out. So what you're asking for is like, hey, here's the initial statement. Where did that come from? Here's the corrected statement. Where did that come from? What processes and procedures led to a corrected statement? Then what are the internal assessment? What failed? Then you are asking like, where did the screw up happen? Then you're saying, okay, how did you fix this so it never happens again? So it's not even so, it's just clarifying these a little cleaner, because I think that's where the confusion is here. It's like initially when this document opened, it was like, oh, 6 was done. Well, 6 really wasn't done, because when you think about what he said today in the video, he didn't address 1 through 5 at all. You know, he just apologized. And that's why I was saying, like, you're not looking for an apology, you're looking for changed behavior. So it's like, well, what was the behaviors that led to this whole mess up? And then how can we ensure those behaviors never happen again? So explain to me one by one. It would be like if you're asking a child, how did you break the microwave? Tell me, what did you do? You know, did you open the door? Did you plug it in? Did you put in tinfoil? What did you do? And what are you going to do that this never happens again? So just clean up the bullet points. I don't want to, they're not steps necessarily. They're just points of clarification that you want. So, I mean, everything you have here is everything I think needs to be asked. It just needs to be like edited, just tidied up. But I do also agree with you that an apology or this formal statement needs to come out sooner than later, because it'll become obsolete.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. No, I appreciate the way you summed that up. And I do believe, coming full circle, when we started this, that was one of the main focus areas that we wanted to understand what happened in this instance, and we still need that to be addressed. So I think cleaning it up makes great sense and providing clarity around that. And as far as some of the larger questions that we still have about overall messaging and appearance of bias in messaging and everything else, those are can be brought up in future conversations and potential recommendations as well. But focused on this, I think understanding what went wrong, why it went wrong, what has happened since, and how is it not going to be repeated are going to be the core things. And to Terry's point earlier, I do believe we didn't want to be overly prescriptive on what needed to be done. We wanted to understand what had happened, what the changes are, and I think we're doing that right now. So.
So just bringing attention to the time, we have about 1 minute left before we want to move to open public comment. So it feels like there's a decision point needs to be made at this point about how you are moving forward with this. Go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah, for this part, are we doing public comment and then like the potential vote?
So we're going to wrap up this piece, and the last agenda item we'll do is open public comment. So if in the wrap of this includes a vote, then that's what we'll be doing right now.
Okay. I think my only concern is I still see like on the doc, I still see some like cross things that are like crossed off and then some suggestions. So Dora, is that like, are the things that are in red are like clearly like agreed upon, and the things that are like crossed off, like, or actually maybe I'm just looking at the wrong thing. I might be. You might be on a completely different doc
No,
that I.
Dory's view just doesn't show the redlining. So Dory's view shows how it exists with all of like the edits already made.
Okay.
But looking at the same doc.
Okay.
There's a
Got it.
lot of red on here.
Okay.
But generally, like sort of where we ended post last week's subcommittee meeting, these are the general edits that were agreed upon that are reflected here. There have been plenty more discussed in this meeting that we haven't necessarily made. So I think the question is, and we could take a little more time here if needed. Do you all want to try to like update this list of requests in this meeting? Or what are we thinking here?
If we can update that list of requests and get a vote in tonight, I am completely in support of that. If we can't update the request in time, then I am in favor of just voting on this document as is. The additional detail would definitely be nice, but I think that getting the document out as opposed to getting lost in translation is preferable.
Heard that, Carrie?
I'd love to get the document out tonight, but I'm fearful of the time and thought that needs to go because it's a lot to process. I felt like I knew what I wanted or understood coming into this meeting, and we've discussed so much. I would like to dedicate more time to this. If we're not voting on it tonight, can we still get it in a timely manner, or do we need to vote on it in a public meeting for it to
We
be?
do.
We do have to
We
do it
are
in a public
yeah.
meeting, but
Okay,
we
our
could.
meeting is when?
Our next public meeting is February 12th, but that is a meeting to discuss subcommittee structure. So that's a little challenging.
Dory, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Is this, we could call a special meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong. Special meeting can occur. It just has to be full, like a majority consensus.
We would need a quorum, and that would be last minute because we would probably have to do it on the next week on the 5th.
Frida said that this is really the last dedicated meeting that we have for this, right? If I'm not mistaken, she said that earlier in the chat. So I would prefer.
So how do you, I guess the thing that I see, that's, sorry to interrupt Leslie and Viva, but the thing that I see is that we're questioning whether to list all of the requests and say some of them have been met, and then, or list some of the requests, and say in the process we were. I think we all agree on what we're still expecting, which is, you know, what has happened to improve the situation that will prevent the misinformation from being released as it was. I could be wrong, but yeah, if we could get down to like the 3 or 2 things that we could request, we could still do it in the next 20 minutes.
Or perhaps we take some of the pressure off of stating it perfectly and just make sure that we schedule a meeting to discuss as we kind of started this meeting. I think the crafting of the Veil of Darkness recommendation I thought was solid, and that's just proof that, you know, things still get lost in translation no matter how they're written. Always happens. So that is perhaps another thing for you to consider.
Yeah, and I think that risk is preferable to us completely losing momentum and just getting lost in translation.
I'm curious what Leslie has to say. Leslie?
Yeah, before you pop in, Leslie, Viva, you had your hand up for a moment. What did you have? And then we'll go to you, Leslie.
Yeah, we was back when we were talking about preferences of voting versus continuing to work, and my thought perspective is that I'd prefer to vote. I think that the more time that passes outside of this moment, more things evolve. I mean, just new things will be put out, new pieces of information to incorporate and influence us. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it perpetuates as things continue to evolve, relationships continue to evolve, events continue to evolve. There will always be a reason to continue to edit. And with that, we might really struggle to actually get something out there. So that's just where my mindset. I'd like to vote.
Leslie?
I would agree with that. I think we also had talked about this being a first step in an overall, you know, plan of recommendations. So just because we put one recommendation through doesn't mean that we can't, you know, do additional recommendations, or even, I don't know if we've ever done it, but amend recommendations based on new information or something like that. So giving us a little bit of flexibility in that way. But I think for the most part, we know what we want to write. I guess on the other hand, if we do hold, if like the majority does choose to, you know, continue working on it a little bit, the next meeting that is a full committee meeting maybe isn't like, there's no long agenda item dedicated for this item or this recommendation, but it's just like the vote, like, you know, that we hold, and then the rest of the meeting can be dedicated to the topics that we already had, if folks do want to keep working on it. But from my perspective, I feel like we have a clear enough direction, and we can always, you know, iterate.
I agree with Leslie.
Right.
Yeah, I still agree that there's a larger conversation to be had around all of this, but pertaining to this particular instance, I think we're in a good place to move forward.
Move forward with
going to a vote.
Okay.
Sorry.
So jump back to the 5 points? Because I think the body is great background information and the conclusion and everything else too. Shall we dig into this?
Yeah, we can also, instead of like adding details to each of these, add it to like the request of like we're requesting like a very detailed, specific like procedural explanation. Does that make sense? That feels easier, but I don't know if that applies evenly.
I think that could work. Like, I'm just shooting from the hip here, but if we were to say our questions about the procedural operations that still exist after the apology are XYZ, that could really help us focus what we're looking for them to do above and beyond what they already did today. What do you guys think? If we were to list out like the specific questions we had about procedural operations?
I'm the only thing I would say is I am hesitant because there's only 6 minutes left and we still have to do public comment if there's any. So unless we're all cool with pushing it. But again, that depends if everyone's okay with it for a quorum.
Yeah, go ahead, Devontae.
Yeah, I'm ready to just, I don't know if we take a poll on who's ready to vote, but um, I'm in favor of voting.
So just to clarify, are we voting on approving the recommendation as it is?
Yes.
Knowing, okay. And with some language to acknowledge today's apology, which I think might be in there from tonight's meeting.
Yeah, there's some language in there
Okay.
already. So we would be the move would be to vote on this recommendations as it is written.
I know it's super tight, but can we just do a quick read through from the beginning, if not in our heads, but if maybe just in our heads so that we all see it from start to finish before we vote.
Well, the one thing that has to get plugged real quick is where it says different language. Some of these, I don't know if that's something that has to be done right now before the vote, or if we can.
I think we can wait on that. We just need to vote on like content, not word for word stuff. That can always be copy edited after. So I,
Cool. So yeah.
and that like for new members, for me, that was really hard to understand that it can change after, but it's really just like the content we want to make sure we agree on, and wording can change after.
Right. Moving towards a vote.
Yes.
So um so the move to so I'm looking for a motion. Are we do motions, right? Dory, we haven't voted with you all in a minute. All right, so I'm looking for a motion to move for a vote on this recommendation as it is written, with the understanding that copy edits will take place post before the publishment of this recommendation.
I motion.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. So now we're going to move into any comments or questions before we move to the vote. All right, let's go ahead and vote. If you are in favor of advancing this recommendations with content as it's stated, understanding that there's also going to be a space for copy edits post prior to the publishment of this, go ahead and raise your hand or vote or yay in the comments. Or there we go. All right, Dory, do you have that count? All right. Are there any abstentions? We'll allow for folks to lower their virtual hands. All right, any abstentions? Any negatives? All right, it looks like unanimous vote in favor of approving this recommendation and its content. All right.
All right, great job, guys. That was definitely really challenging. But you all handled that really well. So we will polish that up and send that out. And we will absolutely plan to request a meeting to discuss sort of your thinking and the intent and any challenges that may arise from that, as we kind of discussed at the beginning of the meeting. But really appreciate everyone's work on that. That was definitely very challenging. And we just have one more thing, and we're at about 8:30, but let's just move right into open public comment. So this is the time where if you have anything else that you would like to comment on related to PCCEP's work or anything that came up in the course of this meeting, members of the public are invited to share that at this time.
Go ahead, Dan.
I know it's late and you're tired, but I was at another meeting. I had to come over here, so I missed a lot of your meeting. I'm sorry about that. And I think I might have said some of these things to you before, but I'm gonna just make sure because not everybody was at all the meetings previously. So you know, Portland Cop Watch publishes a newsletter 3 times a year, and so we published our most recent issue at the end of December, and it's up online. And here's the link right there. We also, at the beginning of January, did an analysis of the Police Review Board report that came out, and I don't know if any of you saw it on the media, but one of the things that we noted was that the sergeant who inserted the alt night prayer into that training video, training slideshow that you got a recommendation about as a group, that was found to be lying by the Police Review Board, but the chief and the mayor agreed to just leave him at 10 days off without pay, which is what he got for being suspected of it. But then when it was proven that he did it and he therefore lied, they disagreed with the Police Review Board's 5-0 recommendation to fire that sergeant. There also is a deadline of February 6th for the city to put together the nominating committee, which will nominate the members of the new oversight board. And I don't know if any of you want to be on that nominating committee, or if you have a network that you can share with. Each district, 1, 2, 3, and 4, has to have one person on there. 3 come from the police, 2 come from the Citizen Review Committee. They've been nominated already, and 1 comes from the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And there's no form, there's no application, there's no real explanation. We put something together to send out to the community on that basis. I can send it to your info email address if that's something you're interested in. But again, like next Thursday is the deadline for them to come up with who's going to nominate the new board, which is a very important task. And I'm trying to say this in a way that's not betraying any confidences, but I don't think this is. But we are in the understanding that the first report from the court-appointed monitor is going to cover the time period from July 1 to December 31 of 2024. Therefore, the compliance officer's last report, which only covered from January 1 to March 31, and that will leave a gap between April and June of 2024. And we've been saying over and over again, not only was that time period where the Portland police used violence at Portland State University, and you remember the settlement agreement was almost completely was completely done by the DOJ's figuring until police attacked protests in 2020. So the fact that the police attacked the protest again is very important, and nobody's going to be looking at it. And there were also 2 deadly force incidents in that time period. Both in the month, all of that happened in the month of May. So I don't know if there's anything you can do about it as the people who are supposed to be making sure the city is following the settlement agreement, but I think that would be really important for somebody to review what happened in those 3 months. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for bringing that up. Is anyone from the independent monitor still here? I know it's way past time, but if anyone can answer Dan's last question. I don't know if you all heard the question. Would you mind repeating it, Dan?
The dates.
Right. Well, I think that the issue I brought up about what time frame the monitor has to cover is something that can only be changed by the DOJ itself and the city. So the city and the DOJ should be the people who have to answer this.
Jared, I see you just popped on. Do you have an answer to that time period, or Stephanie or Sarah?
I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but I think Dan is right that there is a period that the monitor is not going to review. The time period that they're looking at doesn't flow seamlessly from the period when the compliance officer community liaison, Dr. Christoph, last filed their report, and the Department of Justice's seventh periodic compliance assessment report also ended at the March 31 time period. To change the period that the monitor is looking at would require an amendment to the agreement. I don't know that the parties have discussed anything about that. What Dan's suggestion I heard is that for PCEP to make some recommendation about that, and obviously you guys can do what you think is appropriate. You do have a role in the settlement agreement to independently, and the PCEP plan to, monitor implementation of the agreement. And so I think it's an appropriate topic for you guys to think about. I don't know what you want to do on it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Dan, because it's definitely concerning because there was a lot of, I think, and heard of some potential police misconduct and harm. And so I don't want that to go unnoticed in this process. Thanks.
This is Dr. Allen. I was one of the people who tried to bring it to PCEP's attention that we should get out there and talk to those people on the campus before the police got there. But I don't think anything like that happened before or during or even after. And I would like to know from Jared, should we write a letter to him or to the judge?
Can you repeat that, Dr. Allen? What's the question? You asked me?
Yes, Jared. The point is that if we also have a compliance function, we need to do something that's going to almost certainly be a letter as opposed to waving flags or having a strike or a protest. We'll write a letter, and I want to know who we're writing it to you or to the judge.
The who you meaning PCEP? I think PCEP can make recommendations to the Department of Justice, to the independent monitor, to the city, the police chief, or are you speaking of you personally?
No, nothing about me personally. Never, never.
It's just the pronoun you was ambiguous to me, or we, I think. Who do we write the letter to?
PCEP are going to end up writing a letter, and I want to know who we're addressing it to. How we write it might have something to do with who we're addressing it to.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a question for me. I think that's a question for PCEP and the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something we would have to talk about further as PCEP, but it's a good question to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Last call for questions from in open public comment. All right. Seeing as there does not appear to be any more questions at this time, we're going to go ahead and move to wrap this meeting up. Is the slides? Can we get the slides back up? All right. So I think it's been mentioned earlier, our next public meeting is on February 12th with this the special meeting with the subcommittees and piece around PCCEP structure from 6 to 8 via Zoom. And then there's the next meeting after that will be the February 26th, in which voting will take place on the new positions within the new chairs within PCCEP. So any other announcements or events to keep in mind, Dory, that I didn't mention?
That's it.
All right, wonderful. So we want to really just appreciate everyone who came tonight. We want to appreciate Christopher and welcome to PCCEP as our new liaison person. We also want to appreciate Assistant Chief Lavelle. Thank you for being present and supporting us in this conversation. Stephanie, it is always a pleasure. It's happy to know that you'll continue working with us in your new role. And thank you all public members for your comments and your perspectives. Everyone have a wonderful night. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Great work.
Thank you.